Tonight on Nova Legends podcast, I have McLean baseball coach John Dowling, whose Highlanders just won a state championship in baseball. Actually, it's been a month or so now, but won the first state championship at least in a while. Coach, thanks for doing this. Great to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, of course. So let me give your background because a lot of folks, may not know you so well. They should know you now. You're a '05 graduate of Ithaca College. You're a relief pitcher there, I believe.
Yep.
You got your master's degree at Syracuse in 2007. You're from Whitesboro, New York. You began coaching for Rebecca Tillet, or at least you started coaching in Forest Park, but you worked for Rebecca. Coach Tillet, I interviewed her because her team got to the Final Four in the NIT and for St. Louis this year.
Yes.
And you did some basketball there. I was reading about that online. And you, of course, you're coaching baseball there. Got the head job at Lee Lewis. And then in 2013, you got the job at McLean. It must have been a huge moment for you. And done well there. I think you won a district or so regional, but this is your first state title. Coach, did I get most of that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. If I'm getting something wrong, you got to let me know because I hate when I go back and I got everything wrong and people laugh at me. First of all, Coach, winning a state title at McLean, how has that changed your life? How has that made you a different person? I mean, I'm a sports fan. I love the movie Hoosiers. I love tournaments. To me, I love the magic of March Madness, high school state runs. But for you, what has it meant to you to win a state championship?
I mean, I think it's just validating. Like, we put in a lot of time, energy, effort, my staff and I. And to see that rewarded in the ultimate way was pretty satisfying and validating that the work is working.
Yeah. Have you ever won a state title before in high school, or did you ever win a major conference title in college? This is your first major title in your baseball play?
In college, we made the regionals every year. Like, we didn't have a conference tournament. We kind of ran away with the regular season every year. But never made, we lost every year, didn't make it to the College World Series. So that's kind of that's the biggest one for sure.
Did it feel differently than you thought? What did it feel like? I mean, I know you must have thought about it before, but you never want to get your hopes up. But did it feel differently than you thought it would?
I've heard at clinics and stuff, guys say, like, in the moment it's this joyous thing, but like the next day you're going to wake up and you're not going to feel any different. And I never believed it, but it's kind of true. Yeah. Like, it isn't, for me, it wasn't like the work is worth doing because we're doing good work and we're doing what we love. And like, we focus a lot on process over outcome. And like, we did that, we won it. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know, I'm not a changed man. I don't think I'm going to show up in August and start all over again, doing it the same way we always have.
You can't retire and you're still worried about who you're going to have back next year, right?
Yeah.
So, I was reading an article about you online, and one thing you were talking about was you wanted to get deep into the relief staff of one of your opponents. I forgot which game this was, but that reminded me. I'm a big Moneyball guy. Is that the Moneyball thing? You want to make them work and make them throw pitches? Is that the same type of deal, or did I get that all wrong? I don't know much about baseball, Coach.
No, that's kind of the premise. I mean, in high school, the starter is 99 times out of 100, the starter is going to be better than whoever comes in behind him. There's a reason he's starting. A lot of our matchups this postseason, we felt like we were facing a tough starter and that there would be a significant drop off if we could get to the bullpen. Like our opening round game against Oakton, typically their shortstop, Noah Toole, is like upper eights, can throw a breaking ball. He's pretty tough on the mound, but he hadn't really started all year. And so we said, when you get this guy to the game, life gets a lot easier. And the same thing happened in the Madison game. The same thing happened in the Braddock game. The same thing happened in both of the state semis and the finals. We kind of knew the matchups, and we felt that if we could get into the bullpen, we'd be in much better shape. And our guys did a really really good job of executing that approach and grinding out at bat after at bat to get the pitcher's pitch count up so that we could get into the bullpen.
I will say that Noah's a good 3-point shooter in basketball. I've seen him play.
He's a heck of a player.
Yeah, he's a good basketball player. So if he could have gotten you on the basketball court, he would have taken you, Coach. But actually, McLean's got quite a few good basketball players in that building. My man, Calf Eaton. Now, when you talk about baseball, in football, there's so many philosophies. You got teams that focus on the run. You got the wing T. You got some teams still run the single wing. Then you have teams that spread the field, and you're passing ball in every which way. Baseball, are there lots of disparate philosophies as well? Like, do different high school teams have different ways of looking at the game, or is that a little bit different in baseball in that it's balls and strikes, it's getting on base and scoring? I guess you could have teams that like to steal bases and teams that don't. But do most high school coaches approach the game the same, or is it all over the map just like football?
I don't think it's as like disparate of a like wing T versus a spread. But at the same time, like there are teams that really, really focus on the small ball, and they like to bunt a lot. They'll hit and run. They like to steal bases. They squeeze a lot. And whereas historically we were a team that didn't do a ton of that, the big inning wins in high school. Like it's like 90% of games, whoever has the biggest inning is the team that wins. And so we always felt that, giving away outs might preclude us from having said big inning. But this year with our personnel, I think our kids did a really good job of adapting, and we ended up really utilizing the small ball more so than we have probably in my time at McLean. And it worked. Our lineup was we knew we had like 5 or 6 guys at the top that could really swing it. And then we had some other guys that were more role players. And so we had to get a little more creative and a little cuter with, not just roll the balls out and say, go ahead and play, but the coaches having to make some decisions on when's a good time to bunt. Do we want to squeeze here? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. In high school baseball, Coach, how often does like if a team has an ace, how often will that guy pitch? Will he pitch
usually about once a week? Yeah.
Right.
Usually
So
once.
Yeah. So in the way the timing is of the games, so if you're in the postseason, you're probably going to play 2 games a week. So you got to have 2 big starters. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, and the funny thing is, the only week of the year where you are guaranteed to have 3 meaningful games is the state tournament. Most of the district schedules are almost exclusively 2 games a week. The district tournament, the region tournament, it's 2 games a week. And then all of a sudden in states, you got to go Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. And so that did make pitching depth sort of a more important piece of the puzzle once you get to the state tournament.
Yeah. How do you like in high school, whereas unlike college and pro, you have series. So you get a chance to the best team has a chance to impose its will. You get matchups. One game, just like March Madness, in baseball, since it's a numbers game, anything can happen. How do you enjoy the fact that in baseball postseason in high school, it's 1 game? Would you like to see best 2 out of 3 to get a little bit more best team a chance to impose its will?
Yeah, it's tough because you come back to the pitching again, where now all of a sudden, like if all season long you play basically 2 games a week, 3 if there's rain, or 3 if you have like a non-district game, but effectively, you're using the same 3-4 guys all season, and then all of a sudden you got to play a 3-game series in 4 or 5 days. It just sort of changes what you've done all year. I always joke that like a 1-game playoff is absurd, much less a 1-game 7-inning baseball game playoff is really absurd. When you consider, the big leagues, they're playing 162 games, 9-inning games. And we're basically just saying, yep, first 1 to 21 outs wins. So it's a very different ball game. And I think, would it be nice to go to something more like a series? Yeah, but we'd have to adjust our regular season schedules too. And it's been 20-game max for as long as I've been around. So I doubt with the timelines, you could really fit everything in.
Would you coach much differently if it was series? So because you knew you had the whole pitching staff, you had to attack, you had your own pitching staff, which you had to employ. So you may be able to approach a game differently. You think it would change tactics a lot if it was a series?
Yeah, I mean, it would be similar like the region championship was on Friday and then the state started on Tuesday. And so we had to pull our best pitcher in like the third inning of the region championship because we'd already made states and we're like, we have to have him ready for Tuesday. So there'd be more of that. And the week of the state tournament, we kind of had to do the same thing where we're kind of picking and choosing who we're using when, knowing that we've got to get a little cuter with it with 3 games to cover. We were hoping to get the 3 games. And so it might cause, more of that. But again, with the timelines, we can't really start much earlier. We start typically on President's Day. Any earlier than that, and it's, you're sitting in snow. And so they'd have to extend the season or something to be able to pull it, or drastically reduce the number of teams that make the playoffs.
Are the baseball players here much different than the players in Whitesboro where you grew up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to compare. That's 23 years ago I graduated high school now. And that was just the beginning of like the showcase travel ball, really focusing on training in the off season. And so, my school was less than half the size of McLean. We had like 1,100 kids. And so it's not really apples to apples. And being in New York, there's just fewer ball players to begin with, given that they can't get on the field for 5 months out of the year.
Yeah. So how did you get started playing baseball, Coach?
The dad signed me up for T-ball and I got out there.
Who's your first hero? Who was your first hero in baseball?
I was a huge Nolan Ryan fan. That was my guy.
Right.
Nolan Ryan.
You wanted to be a pitcher.
Yeah. I mean, by that point I was kind of I realized like that was what I was best at. And that was my guy, Nolan Ryan.
And you were a fastball pitcher?
It wasn't very fast.
Yeah. Right. But you were a strikeout pitcher is what he is, Nolan Ryan.
Yeah, he was. I was not.
Right. So you evolved into a relief pitcher, right, Coach, eventually?
Yes.
And why is that? Why does a pitcher become a relief pitcher?
Basically my college coach sat me down and he's like, look, in the fall one year, he's like, look, you're not gonna be good enough. We don't think you're gonna make it unless we make some changes. And so I was kind of like in high school, I could get by with my 85-mile-an-hour fastball, but it was pin straight. And so we dropped my arm slot down to like a low 3/4 sidearm look. And all of a sudden things started clicking for me. In my junior year, there was kind of a lot of openings in the bullpen. The previous closer had graduated and had some early success and just rode it for the next 2 years.
Now, is that tough mentally on an athlete that the players are warmed up, everyone else is into their game, and you come in kind of cold? Is that an adjustment, and it takes a special type of athlete to be able to handle that?
Yeah, it's very different than starting. Starting is very manicured and set, and you've got your schedule. You know when you're throwing. You know what time to start throwing. Whereas when you're in the pen, it's all of a sudden somebody yells down and you got to get hot. So there is a little bit of a mindset shift that has to happen to kind of transition from those 2 different roles.
Yeah. So, Coach, you ended up going to Ithaca. Was baseball an important part of your decision? No matter where you went to college, is baseball going to be an important part of that decision, or were you going to go to college and then wherever you went, you were going to play baseball?
No, I wanted to play, and I by the time it was senior year, I kind of realized that I wouldn't be good enough to play at the Division I level. I didn't have the skills, and my college coach was out actually recruiting a different kid that I threw that game, and he liked what he saw. And Ithaca was one of the schools I had on my list. I knew they were extremely successful. I didn't want to go somewhere, and I knew I wouldn't be happy going 5 and 25 every year. And they had good academics. My grandfather had actually gone there. And so it kind of checked a lot of boxes for me. And so he offered me a chance to walk on, and it all worked out.
Yeah. What was that coach's name there?
George Valliere.
And what did you learn from him?
A lot. He won like 1,200 games. He's in the ABCA Hall of Fame. I by my junior year of college, I kind of realized that the end of the road was coming for baseball, and I knew by that point I was pretty confident I wanted to be a teacher so that I could coach. So one of the benefits to being in the bullpen was that I would just stand next to him for 6, 7 innings and try to soak it all up, and then go get hot when he said to get hot. And so he is a very old school approach, very different from what you see being successful today. But it worked for him in that environment, and he got to recruit the kids that it would work with. And I mean, I learned a lot about managing the people just from being around and observing, like something that, as a 20-year-old kid, you're not thinking about like managing egos really. You're just worried about yourself. And that kind of stuff, the things that, don't show up in a box score. It's not, should we bunt here? Should we not? The more managing the people and the team. And really, when I look back, like the culture that he created and how an environment of high expectations can get you the results you want.
Yeah. Coach, do pitchers make the best coaches generally, or I bet the catchers would probably make great
catchers are generally, yeah, it's usually catchers.
Catchers because they're involved in they're involved there. They play
Yeah,
every day.
especially at the pro level, like it's like 30% of them are former catchers.
So, how'd you end up in Northern Virginia?
This is as far south as you can go and still get paid as a teacher. You had anywhere much warmer than this, and the pay starts dropping off pretty precipitously. And so I knew I didn't want to live in upstate New York. I spent 23 winters in upstate New York, and that was plenty. I have family in Leesburg, so I'd visited the area before, and wanted to be around a big city, being kind of young. And so it just kind of worked out that this area kind of checked a bunch of boxes for me. And I've been here 17 years now.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Lansdowne, Coach. Next time you're up here, you gotta let me know. We can have a coffee. So I know at some point you ended up at Forest Park. Was that your first school in Northern Virginia?
Yeah, that was just the first school that hired me. And I met in the fall with the baseball coach, and they didn't have a JV coach. The previous guy had left. So I was the JV coach all by my lonesome for 2 years, no assistants. And then moved up to the varsity team for 2 years. And then moved on to Lewis.
Right. So I know you coach basketball with Coach Tillet, and I read an article that it really, you learned some things. She's done quite well. She obviously an amazing coach. I think her brother's a coach and her dad was a coach.
Yep.
What did you learn from Coach Tillet?
I learned what it really means to work hard as a coach. She would, on like a random Tuesday game that we probably won by 40, she would be up until 2, 3 in the morning, watching film, taking notes, cutting video for the next day to look at before practice. And like, I had never been on the coaching side. I had never really been exposed to someone that would take it to that level. And I quickly learned that like, if you're willing to put in the work, there are marginal gains to be made. And watching her run a practice and like the amount of time she spent organizing for a practice and making a practice plan, I have 100% stolen from her. And being as organized as humanly possible, you can get the most out of that time.
Yeah. Well, you're at Forest Park, which is kind of in the suburbs, exurbs, whatever that word is. I'm in Leesburg, and it's big baseball country as well. Do you get more baseball players out here further from the city than you get? I know McLean's got an incredible tradition with the Little League, but generally, do you get more baseball players out here further from the city than you get close, like McLean or Arlington?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the closer in, I mean, PVI is out that way now, but historically the schools closer to Arlington and DC, we end up just losing more to private schools. because if we had our full complement of players over the last decade, I don't think that would have been number one. And so like, and it is what it is. Like that's people have to make their choices. But I think out by you guys, or further out, like especially you get to Prince William, there's not really much in the way of private schools, and so you get all the kids you're supposed to have at your school.
Right. So you get when you're at schools like Lewis, you're going to have a lot of Latino kids, and certain countries in Latin America, amazing baseball, Dominican Republic, Panama, Puerto Rico, Cuba. Others, they're completely soccer countries.
Yeah.
So you go to Lewis. That must be a fascinating challenge when you have that many different cultures. And I think the Latino folks that come here tend not to be from the countries that really prioritize baseball. But it still must be a fun challenge when you go to school like Lewis.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, I remember talking to the soccer coach, and they had like 120 kids try out. And we had like 13 and kept 12.
That poor
So
kid.
it was, yeah, it was definitely a challenge. Like I knew going in that it was going to be a challenge. But I also wanted to I knew I wanted to be a head coach. I wanted the chance to run my own program. And I was living in Arlington at the time. And so I wanted to be closer to home, get my feet in the door in Fairfax. And we were really lucky. We inherited, the two classes that we had some dudes that could play. We just were always like one turned ankle away from, oh my God, what are we going to do? Just zero depth. And we were playing, back then, the first game I ever coached as a head coach was against Braddock. And I watched them take infield. Now I will go to my grave swearing this to be true. I watched them take infield, and I was like, that team's going to win the state championship this year. And they did. And we didn't belong in the same field. Like skill wise, we were just so far behind. And back then, like that old, Patriot District was just an absolute. Braddock, West Springfield, South County, Woodson were all loaded every year. And little old Lewis with our 13-man roster we struggled a little bit.
Yeah. Did it make you a better coach? I mean, if you'd have gone right to McLean and the great feeder program that the Little League they have, you think coaching at Lewis and really making you do with what you have made you a better coach?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to get creative, think outside the box, particularly when it comes to like practice and how do I find ways to increase the skill quicker and just being like a little more creative because you don't have guys walking like 25 guys walking through the door that have the kind of fundamental skills down. Definitely made me a better coach and forced me to like find ways to kind of step outside the box and say like, how else could we accomplish this thing we're trying to accomplish here? If we can't do it like everybody else can, what can we do?
Yeah. Is there a way you can enjoy that kind of coaching as much as you enjoy McLean when you have the horses and it's just a matter of coaching them up where you can beat teams that have as much talent as you do? I mean, can you have a good time coaching kids at that level as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was super lucky. I had an awesome staff, a guy that's still with me, and then three other awesome coaches that were with us there. But for me, like I quickly realized that I wouldn't be happy there long, just because it's a public high school. Like you get the kids that walk through the door. And as I noted, like there was 120 of them that want to play soccer, but none of them, it was a really cool school to teach at, super diverse population. But like you said, we didn't have the Caribbean Islanders that play baseball. We had a bunch of soccer players, and the amount of energy and effort that went into, going 7-14 or whatever, was going to grind me down to a nub pretty quickly. I think I'm just too competitive to put that much effort in and not see. And I was younger, like I was less mature. But at the same time, like I want to win. And that is a very, very challenging place to. They didn't even have a team for 2 years, a varsity team. Last year was the first year in the past 3 seasons they even had enough kids for a team. So that would be a really challenging place to spend too long. But I'm very grateful for the opportunity there because I learned so much about coaching.
Yeah. They've had an amazing run in soccer the last 3 or 4 years. I think I've been to the state tournament the last maybe 3 of the last 4. This year, the team was unbelievable. They got knocked off by a tough Herndon team, but they really, Coach Millward has done an incredible job. So when you got the job at McLean, I know you're a social studies teacher, I believe. Did you get a job in the building at McLean when you got the job, the baseball job?
So initially, no. And then a couple weeks, so I was going to have to stay at Lewis to teach and then go to McLean every day. And then thank God they were able to move some stuff around and they got me in the building for that first year, that 2013-14 school year.
That a big advantage to be in the building I'd say probably when I played, I went to Robinson class of 84. I would say when I was in high school, 90% of the coaches were in the building, somewhere. Nowadays, I'd probably say 10% of coaches are in the building. They're people that coach, they have other jobs. If they teach, they may teach at another school. But it's not necessarily a given that the coach is going to be teaching in the school. Do you think that's an advantage for you to be in the school?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You get to know the kids so much better. I mean, you see them in the hallways, they can stop by anytime. Like the dealing with the field is such a big one. For baseball, it's most days it's at least an hour of field work, and I don't even mow our lawn. And if you're off campus, like you got to get to and fro, and then it rains and you don't know what the field looks like. It's being in the building is absolutely huge.
Yeah. So McLean is one of the, probably in terms of population, one of the richest public schools in the country. And, but the school is very modest. There's nothing really fancy about the school. It's old school. It's old school type of school. How would you characterize the McLean students that you get? Obviously, you do get some baseball players there that have been trained really well. But how would you characterize the students that go to McLean?
I had when I was at Lewis, not being from the area, you just know that McLean's an affluent community. And so you just assume people assume that they're going to be rich snobs and whatever. And I won't say that I went in with that perception, but I was very pleasantly surprised that first year about I feel like the community instills the value of hard work to their kids. And so if mom and dad do really well, they point out it's because they work their butts off. And we get kids that see that connection between the effort I put in is going to give me the outcomes that I'm going to earn. And that was kind of a really cool thing to see, that there is sort of this built-in understanding that yeah, we might be well off, but it's because mom and dad work hard and studied hard and pursued their goals to achieve those things. There's no handouts. And so, it's a really cool place to teach and coach.
Yeah. What makes the McLean Little League so special?
That's a good question. Especially on the softball side. Oh my God. The softball is they win the state tournament every year. Mm-hmm. I think, some of it is opportunity. So it is an affluent area. So many people have the money to train in the off season and hire instructors. They have one of the most incredible Little League complexes that you could ever dream up. The building that's there, the Little League I played at had a wooden press box that was maybe 15 by 15. And when you pull up to McLean Little League, there is this castle of a building that overlooks all the fields, and they have their boardroom in and everything. It's a really, really beautiful complex. And so I think that attracts people, right? You got a nice place to go play. You're going to be more likely to want to go play.
Yeah. And is baseball rich? Is it a rich kid sport now because of the $500 bat that I've been hearing about? There was a time when I was in the 70s, baseball was still America's pastime. I think mid 70s is when it first started moving over to football. But at the time, a lot of great black athletes were playing baseball. Reggie Jackson, Dave Winfield, Dave Parker. I mean, there's so many. Willie Mays, Ken Griffey and his son. So many great players now. I don't know if these guys would be playing baseball anymore. Is it? Do you think it's a rich kid sport?
Yeah, I mean, there are prohibitive costs at times, especially when you get to like, to play for your school, you basically you don't need anything, right? Like you need a glove, some spikes, like the school, your buddy will loan you a bat. If a kid doesn't have a bat, I will get them a bat. But at the end of the day, like to play outside of school is extremely expensive. The off-season training and then the trips down to Georgia and Florida all summer and fall. It absolutely does preclude some people that don't have the means from playing simply because the $500 bat is a one-time cost. Like fine, you can maybe buy one secondhand and it's cheaper. It's the 5 nights in a hotel room in Jupiter, Florida, and getting there and back. That is really where people have to draw a line in the sand, and they're like, we just can't afford to do this, which is sad. It's unfortunate. But I forgot, SI did a thing a couple of years ago, and it was like the military sports complex, right? Like these people are making money off these kids, and so it just kind of perpetuates itself because they're making money and capitalism works. And so if there's people willing to pay, they're going to keep putting these events on, and it's sad that it does exclude people.
So when we were kids, we played baseball. We played with the tennis ball in our cul-de-sac, and I was a football, basketball player, but we played so much often. I was a pretty good baseball player. And then by the time I was an adult and I started playing adult softball, I was great. I was a really good outfielder. So the fact that I played all that, I guess you call it sandlot or whatever in our cul-de-sac, I had the skill levels, and if I ever would have applied myself to baseball, I probably would have been fine. Are kids playing in the cul-de-sacs? Are the kids playing sandlot these days?
No, they definitely are not.
So
Unfortunate.
you're not going to have a kid show up, a freshman who hasn't really played that much, that you can coach up. That doesn't happen. They just try out. You see the talent. You have 4 years with them. You're not going to have that many kids like this try out. Most of the kids you have been trained and played with high level travel teams or Babe Ruth, whatever you call it.
Yeah, I would say most, not all, but like most of them have had, it's pretty rare to get a kid that basically has never played before. Baseball skills are just too specific. If you got a kid that's a good athlete, you can in a season make them a competent lacrosse player because so much of it is speed, strength, hand-eye coordination. But with throwing a ball and trying to hit the ball with the bat it's just not like a natural. Those natural athletes can't just take to it so quickly. So it's pretty rare that we get kids that are trying out that basically haven't played before. But most of them, yes, they train in the off season, or they did when they were younger. They play on teams in the summer. They play on teams in the fall. The 3-sport athletes are really rare these days. And most of them, some of them, sometimes I feel like they get overtrained from a injury standpoint, and 2, some guys end up becoming kind of baseball robots and they don't know how to play the game. They just know how to train. And so that's something that, again, like the system works. Like we get kids that wouldn't be athletic enough to play most rectangular sports, football, basketball, lacrosse, whatever. But because they have access to training, they are able to, especially like on the pitching side, like that was me. Like I wasn't athletic enough to play like high school basketball or high school lacrosse or whatever. But I could learn how to do a repeatable motion. And I had some size to me and I had a good work ethic. And so it can work out. So it is kind of an interesting time right now, seeing how the travel ball stuff and the injury rates and the amount they're training, how that all kind of continues to evolve. And hopefully people start to kind of see that, like, just because you're playing 360 days a year doesn't guarantee you anything but a hurt arm.
Yeah. What percentage of your kids play another varsity sport?
This year, we had 3 that ran indoor track. I'm trying to think, not many,
Yeah.
not many at all.
And is there a club team? What's more important to them, the club team or their high school team for baseball?
So they care high school baseball is what they care about when it comes to winning and losing. That's like it's a far cry from playing on some backfield in Hobunk, Georgia. The travel ball, the club stuff is largely for recruiting because our season coincides with college season. So it's difficult for schools outside of, we get maybe like a tech would be about as far as folks can really travel during the week to come see us play. And so the club teams is 99.9% about recruiting. High school is about winning.
Yeah. In basketball and football, best coaches coach high school. The AAU and other types of football, they're good coaches there, but the best coaches generally are coaching high school. Soccer, the best coaches generally are coaching club. And there are some that do both, but generally I would think it's fair to say the best coaches are coaching club soccer. What about baseball? Are the best coaches coaching club or are they coaching high school?
I mean, I'm not there, so I don't want to pass judgment on that, but I would say that like we just serve very different roles. For us, the season starts and we're trying to assemble a team that can win, that is a team. In the summer, they're trying to showcase their skills so that they can get recruited for college. And so like, are they trying to win those games? Yeah, they're not trying to lose, but like at the end of the day, like a lot of the decisions those guys have to make are based on he's got to get 2 at-bats today because so-and-so is here to see him from GW. Whereas I'm like, you're getting 2 at-bats today because I think you can help us win.
Yeah.
And so we serve sort of different roles within that ecosystem.
Yeah. I met a parent whose son would have played for you. He ended up going to Gonzaga, and it was very competitive there. May not have played as much as he wanted to play, and his dad really thinks he wishes they would have stayed at McLean. And when my son played midfielder for Yorktown, he had a kid, transferred back from Gonzaga, and he probably would have played football at Gonzaga his senior year or whatever, but he ended up being all district in baseball. Football, basketball, and soccer. And those are things you couldn't do at Gonzaga. First of all, soccer and basketball, soccer and football in the same season, but it's just so competitive. Basketball would have been a dream for him to play on the basketball team at Gonzaga. Is that a familiar story where kids will transfer to private schools and thinking they're going to improve their lot, but they end up not even playing that much? And as competitive as McLean baseball is and other Madison baseball, other great programs, aren't they just better off just staying in the public system?
I would say so.
Yeah.
And and I look, I don't fault anybody for making the choices they think are right for their family and for their kids. But I would also point out that like McLean is one of the best public schools in the state of Virginia. And to be able to go to school in your community with your kids, like Gonzaga always wants to play us every year because they have so many kids that are from like Fairfax County so that their buddies can actually come to one of the games because nobody's trekking into Nats Academy on a Tuesday night from Oakton to watch their buddy play baseball. And that real like true community feel, I think, is something that, you can't get there. And I mean, we play them every year and we win some, they win some. Like, it's not like one of us is dominating the other anyways. And I don't get to pick my kids. I get the ones that walk through the door. And, we have worked really, really hard to build a strong culture within our baseball program and we've had a good run the last 4 or 5 years. We've had 1 or 2 kids every year that transfers in from private. And so I'm hopeful that, part of that is because our reputation precedes us in the way we do things and that, the culture that we try to build and being able to play, like literally be in your community, I think is something that, the private schools just can't offer because of the geography of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hearing horror stories about kids in other sports transferring out of these great, incredible schools for the opportunity to play college basketball and stuff. I'm just like, okay, Good luck. Good luck to you guys. So, Coach, I know you had a very young team this year. I know you had, I believe, Ethan Ball, second baseman, is a junior. I believe Brennan Coro, I believe, is a junior first baseman. I get his name right,
Yep.
Coach?
Yeah.
Alex Gonzalez, the pitcher. He was a junior, also, Coach.
Yeah.
So I know you had a young team coming in this year. Um, and I think Yato Shimo was a senior, though, right? The outfielder. Yeah, so those
Yeah.
are your all region players. I know you had a lot of great players. But what were your expectations coming into the season with such a young team? Did you have any idea that you can compete for titles this year?
Yeah. I mean, each of the last 3 seasons, we felt like we had as much talent on the field as anybody out there. And like last year, we got bit by injury. The previous in 23, we really got bit by injuries. In the middle of the year, we didn't throw enough strikes. Like we were just beating ourselves a lot of nights. And at the start of this year, that was sort of the same thing. But I mean, I knew, and we vocalized that to them that like we have as much talent in our dugout as anybody in the state. So we just got to figure out how we can be successful. Like what are the things that we need to do to be successful as a team? But from day one, we knew we had the talent. It's just a matter of being able to execute.
Is that one thing? Like one thing, like, I know soccer really well, and often you have to move players to different positions. Like you may have 3 or 4 great midfielders. One of them has to play striker, one of them has to play defense, because it's not like you can recruit for a position. You want all your best players to be on the field in soccer. Does that happen in baseball? Whereas you may have a great shortstop, but you may have to play second or third because you have someone else that can play shortstop. Does that happen to you a lot?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's how Ethan Ball ended up. He's a Virginia Tech commit, and for the last 2 years, he's played third base and second base, even though he's a shortstop by trade. And it was just what you're describing of how do we get our best team out on the field. And it worked out this year that we didn't really have like a lot of needing to move guys around. We kind of by the second half of the year, we pretty much had pretty set lineup. Everybody kind of knew where they were going to be and knew what their job was.
Yeah. Well, Coach, as good as your team was, you didn't set the world on fire in the first 11 games. I'm not trying to be critical here, Coach, but
No, you're not.
5-6 after 11 games. The schedule looked really tough. I saw some private schools on there. I assume you wouldn't have scheduled them if they weren't tough. And you had some one-run losses as well. At that point in the season, yes. Were you really concerned at that point in the season, Coach?
Concerned, yeah. I mean, because we knew we had the talent. We knew we could compete with anybody, and it was just like the no good, very bad month. Like anything that could go wrong went wrong. We had some injuries. Yuta got hurt. We were down 2 first basemen. We were down to a Ball was playing some first. JV kids were playing first. We were really struggling on the infields defensively. And it was just like, and we had a stretch of like, during that stretch, it was like 7 of 8 games, we saw the other team's number 1 pitcher. And so you added all those up and it was like, all right, we beat ourselves a couple times. We ran into really good arms a couple times. And all of a sudden we're 5-6. But once we did feel like once we got healthy, we'd be all right. And that proved to be the case. But we also, like at the beginning of last year, people, at school, other coaches, how are you guys going to be this year? And my assessment was, I said, if we can play average defense, we can beat anybody. And for 11 games, we did not play average defense. we were struggling. But we were able to figure it out. And it's a testament to the guys not quitting on it and packing it in and showing up every day ready to work, because we had to, especially on the defensive side, we had to change the way we were doing some things, and they saw the writing on the wall and said, you know what, you're right. And we kind of just got back to some of the fundamentals, and we were able to get healthy, and then all of a sudden things started to turn around a little bit.
Now you mentioned using JV kids. Now in baseball, like in football, you usually can't, your freshmen and sophomores, even if they're talented, you wait on them. You don't want them to get hurt because football is a contact sport. Basketball, the kids really need to grow. You may have a great point guard that can play as a freshman, but and McLean had an amazing freshman, Simus that played varsity, was amazing.
Yeah.
generally that's not every day. What about baseball? Can freshmen and sophomore who are very skilled compete with the seniors, or it takes time? They have to wait their turn like the rest of the kids.
No, we've started freshmen. The ball kid started his whole freshman year. We had another kid that led the region in hits as a freshman, Griffin Stig, back in 2019.
Mhm.
And so, my line is always like, I don't care how old you are, if you can play, you're going to play, period. Like the best 9 are going to be out there. I don't care if they're 9th grader. Shoot, I wish they let us have 8th graders. Because I'm not kidding. Like both those kids probably could have been a bat off the bench as 8th graders. And a lot of that just falls down to like physicality and how physical they are. The 2 guys I just described were units when they were in 9th grade. Like they could deadlift 350, 400 pounds when they were 14 years old. And part of that is just like dumb luck. Like, do you mature early or late? But part of that is like when I speak at clinics for youth stuff, I'm always like, getting in the weight room as a middle schooler is an absolute cheat code to being successful at high school sports. Because it's not optional these days. It doesn't matter what sport you're playing. Like you can't just be naturally athletic and be good enough these days with the amount of time and energy people put in, especially in the weight room side. And like you look at these kids now, and I'm like, none of my teammates looked like that in high school. I didn't look like that in high school because the times they're changing. We know a lot more about how to train those guys, and so really it boils down to, for us, it's how are they physical enough as freshmen? And if they are, great, let's go. You're playing.
Yeah. Well, yep, that's awesome. And it really helps you build for the future. Liberty District is a great district for baseball. It's great for everything, really. Some sports like basketball, they don't have necessarily Division I talent, but you got packed gyms, you got great coaches, you got great competition every night. Soccer is amazing. Football's tough. Baseball, I know, is tough. Yorktown's good. Marshall's good. How did district play go, and did it get you ready for the postseason?
It went poorly at first, as we noted. I mean, we had a stretch of 5 district games where we allowed 3 earned runs. A stretch of 3 district games where we allowed 0 earned runs, and we lost all of them. And so, that middle part of the season, like we were talking about, we were able to figure it out. I think that a lot of our opponents saw us as the sort of the favorite because we saw everybody's number 1 virtually every night. And you alluded to the schedule. That was another thing I learned from my college coach was we would go to California every spring break and play like these perennial powerhouses that were, 10-2 at that point. And we hadn't even been outside yet. We hadn't seen green grass once.
Mhm.
And we go out west and we get our butts kicked. But you learn very quickly, like what your weaknesses are. They get exposed, and who can play a little bit, like who can handle the pressure of those superior opponents. And so I try to do the same thing. My staff jokes that my goal is that we start every season 0-2 because we play 2 out of district games and we get beat and then we learn a bunch. And so I think that helped, seeing a lot. Everybody had a guy in our district this year. Like every team had a pitcher that you were like, he's tough. And so night in and night out, we weren't seeing a lot of like average arms. And I think over the long haul, that really did help us because we were used to it.
Yeah. Well, you lose districts, and you lost the regional final as well. But all you have to do is get to the regional final to get to state. But I know one of the biggest games of the year for you had to be when you beat Madison. Madison is an incredible program. I interviewed Coach Pudge, and love talking to him. And they just got a machine over there,
They do.
and they got a machine. And I know you guys share a border. There's Marshall, Madison, McLean. It's all kind of close. I know that must have been a huge game. Tell us about the Madison game.
Yeah, that was, we talked earlier about kind of our game plan for a lot of them. Like we knew their starter was pretty tough. And we felt like if we could keep it close, get him out of the game, we'd be in good shape. But that's effectively what, we got into their bullpen and we scored a couple, had a couple big hits. Our one of our pitchers, our starter wasn't great that night. He got knocked out with like 1 out in the second. And one of our seniors, Jack Nance, who was in the postseason, he threw 20 innings, 0 earned runs. And he threw 5 2/3 of shutout baseball in that game, to keep it close and give us a chance to take the lead late, and then ultimately hung on to it.
Yeah. What did Coach Pledge say to you? Was he good? Was he a good sport about it?
Yeah, we get along great.
It's yeah, I'm sure it's tough. That was a regional semifinal. Is that right, Coach?
Yes.
And then you played a hot South Lakes team. And South Lakes was kind of like you guys in that the record wasn't spectacular, but they seemed their bats were really hot, and they beat you that game. So what was that game? What was the regional final like?
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, it's like it kind of stinks how you have to fudge the pitching. Because like you're looking at matchups for sure, like, winner, loser. We kind of on the other side, we felt like Braddock was probably going to win, and that they were a much tougher matchup. So like, yeah, you want to win that game. But if you throw your ace for 7 innings and then he's not available Tuesday, and you still don't win, now what? Now you got your number 2 going against the better opponent. And so, we didn't have our starter, our guy that Alex Gonzalez, who was absolutely dominant this year. That was probably his worst start of the year. He knew he was on a pitch count. He was not happy about that. But we had said like, nope, we're going to have you ready to go Tuesday. We're not going to wear you out tonight. He wasn't great. And we just didn't hit much. Like we just couldn't seem to get anything going offensively. South Lakes had a really good approach to the plate. They did a really good job of forcing us to get in the zone a little more. We were behind a lot of batters. So really disappointing. That's the second time we've stood on the field watching the other team win the region. You got to sit there and they hand out the little ribbons, and that's just like the most miserable 15 minutes. Like all the credit to South Lakes, they played better than us 100%. They beat us. But man, it's a miserable 15 minutes sitting there being like, yep, they beat us. Let's go.
But you're still alive, Coach. And you get Lake Braddock on that Tuesday. Lake Braddock has been killing people. There lots of lopsided scores. But I guess you saved Gonzalez. Tell us about the Lake Braddock game.
We knew the drum kid was 16-0 his junior and senior year going into that game. And he's like, their starter is like the worst matchup you could ask for. He's like the perfect high school pitcher. He literally never walks guys. He had like 3 walks on the season. They play clean defense behind him. He throws like a really high spin fastball that's really hard to get on top of. So the balls in play generally tend to be fly balls anyways. And so we knew exactly what we were getting. We had actually seen him 2 of the previous 3 years in non-district games. And so we kind of knew what we were getting. The way the schedules worked out, we got a chance to scout them a couple times in the postseason. So we had a pretty good feel, like we knew their offensive personnel and we knew what we were getting out of the starter. And so then it really just comes down to like, can we execute the game plan, which was we got to get on top of the fastball. We got to force guys. We got to force our way onto base. We got to hit to win. We're not going to get walks. And then on the defensive side, we kind of knew that Alex's stuff would probably play well, I guess, especially against their righties. And he did an exceptional job of doing just that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it was an amazing win. You get to the state semifinals, and the great thing about the state semifinals is I believe McLean had 3 teams going down to Richmond. You had soccer team. Was it the lacrosse team going down? Who else was going down?
Us in soccer.
Just soccer. Okay, so that must have been great. They had festival style. I went down there to watch soccer. I was down there at the McLean. I forgot who they played.
Cosby?
They played Garfield. Garfield, I believe. But at first, they played in the final. They played Cosby. Yes.
Yeah.
But I was there. I was down there for both games. So who did you play in the semis? And tell us a little bit about that game.
We played Glen Allen.
They're a powerhouse, right? Glen Allen.
They historically have some good players, and they play. You were asking about kind of philosophies. They play a very particular brand of baseball. They do a bunch of running and bunting and like try to get you to beat yourself. and it was odd because, going into the game, like I've never seen them play. And so like we're calling anybody we know that might have seen them. They had beaten Battlefield in the quarters, and we kind of knew what we were gonna get. We were able to get some video, and we kind of knew what we were gonna get on the mound. And the first inning, we hit a home run, and we went up 2-0. And then we came out in the bottom and gave up 3. And their hitters, we kind of quickly realized that the guy we had throwing was like the perfect matchup for them, because they're just trying to shoot everything the other way. They're just trying to find a barrel and shoot it to the right side. And he's like a low slot righty that had a really fastball with a lot of movement. And after the first inning, I'm not exaggerating, I think we called 3 breaking balls for the rest of the game. We literally just set up on the inside black and threw fastballs running in on their hands for the rest of the day. And he did an exceptional job of executing that. I mean, there must have been, out of the next, 18 outs, it must have been like 14 ground balls. And we were up 1 going into the 7th, and into the top of the 7th, we were up 1, and 1 against them felt like a tied game. I was like, we got to get to 2 or 3 here. Like they're going to find a way, as many options as they have on offense, to just squeeze one across. And so we ended up, as I said before, we got into the bullpen, and blew up for a pretty big inning. Our center fielder, Gabriel Pegues, had a huge 3-run double, and then we tacked on a couple more after that, to kind of make that 7th inning a lot less stressful. And the other key there is Aiden, the kid that pitched, threw a complete game. And that allowed us to save the Nance kid who had thrown so well, and Gonzalez, who had thrown on Tuesday, would be eligible on Saturday. And so all of a sudden we knew, if we could get through that game with just Aiden and not using those other guys, we knew we kind of had more arms left than anybody else.
Yeah, worked out perfect. Real quickly, Coach, you mentioned scouting. Is scouting the thing in baseball you have to do in person, or do you do it in video, or it's both?
Both. Like a lot of times for pitchers, we can kind of look at box scores and say like, all right, this is the guy that's probably going to throw, and you just punch his name into YouTube or Google, and you end up finding video, because most of them have like a recruiting video, or the scouting services like Prep Baseball Report. Somebody will have video of him somewhere, and so we can send that to the kids, and they get an idea of what's the shape of his breaking ball, what's his arm action look like. Like there's no surprises there. For me to scout like the team, video is not very helpful, just because you can't see like a hole in a kid's swing. You can't see how they hold runners at second. You can't see, like, is the catcher looking to back pit? Like there's so many things that in person you can see that you can't on video. That video, I don't use a ton of video for like the team. It's usually the pitchers.
Yeah. Sounds like it could be a lot of work. Scouting baseball seems like it could be a labor intensive thing. So you got South Lakes in the final, red hot South Lakes. Was it an advantage that they'd already beaten you and you had your ace in the hole, literally? The fact that they had beaten you, they beat you. I think they beat you you didn't beat you soundly, but they beat you. But you had Gonzalez. He was rested. Maybe that was kind of a mental. That was actually an advantage for you.
Yeah, we had beaten them in a regular season non-district game.
Mm-hmm.
And then we lost them in the region final. So it was, sort of the rubber match. Yeah, so you go back to the region final, and this is back to like 1-game playoffs are kind of crazy, because you go back to the final and they win. So they saved their best arm for the Friday game. They threw their second best guy on Tuesday because they felt like they could beat West Potomac with him, so that they had their best guy ready on Friday. But then that meant he was not able to pitch on Saturday. Whereas we had to do the opposite, and that meant our best guy was available to pitch on Saturday. So it's kind of funny that, like, if you go back, you're like, well, actually once we got past Lake Braddock, which was not easy, we actually had the better pitching rotation lined up because of that. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we knew, I mean, at the end of the day, we knew we had the most arms left. And so, going into that game, the kids thought we were crazy. We started Brennan Core this year. But he's a strike thrower. And we knew that if we could we said, get us through the lineup once, get the game going. Gonzalez had not thrown on 3 days on a full workload. He threw 90 something against Braddock. And on 3 days rest, we didn't know what we were going to get. Whereas with Brennan, we knew he just throws strikes. And like, if they hit, they hit. And shoot, he's a check swing away from 2 shutout innings. So check swing, they call it a ball, and the next pitch, the kid hits a nuke. But he did a really good job. And we knew, like, if we could just get into the game, the deeper it got, the more the advantage went to us because we had Nance and Gonzalez available as well.
Oh, so I'm sorry, Gonzalez did not pitch the final. He pitched on Tuesday.
He was available, but he had not thrown on 3 days rest all year.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Yeah.
And when he had, I guess he might have once or twice, but it was like he had thrown 30 or 50 pitches, not 90. I think it was 92 against Braddock. And so, we kind of said, like, we're going to use you. We just don't know when, because we don't know what we're going to get. And we don't want to start with walk HBP simply because we're asking you to do something that we've never asked you to do before.
Yeah. So your bats were incredible. You scored 15 runs. It's 15-5. Is that because South Lakes didn't have their ace, or just you had a good game plan for the pitcher?
Yeah, we had seen the pitcher enough times that we kind of knew what he was about. And we knew that there was a pretty big drop off from him to the bullpen. And so it was sort of that same formula where we're like, all we got to do is keep it close for the first few innings. And then we're going to be in good shape, because the deeper the game goes, the more the advantage goes to us because of the pitching depth.
Yeah. So, Coach, what was the reception after you won? I know school was probably let out, so it probably wasn't as big as it could have been. But was it a big reception when you got back? Did McLean really celebrate you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we still had graduation. Graduation was the Tuesday before. So no, we had a day or two of school, but it was kind of anticlimactic because, their kids aren't really there. I mean, they're there, but like, they're there to take like an hour-long exam and then go home. So that part of it was kind of weird, but there was a huge outpouring. Like, I had like 190 something text messages the next day. Like, everybody that I've ever met was congratulating us, and anyone that had ever played for us was so happy. And our administration and the staff at school. But in person, it was weird because you just didn't really see very many people.
Yeah. Well, Coach, this has been great. Thanks for taking the time, Coach Dowling. I really enjoyed this and getting your views on the game. So I don't know that much about baseball, so you really educated me on a lot of it. Just last questions and two-part. What do you think about next year? What's your preview for next year? It seems like you guys should be tough again. And also, what are your personal goals for coaching? What would you like to do? What would you like to do in your coaching career besides? Is it something besides high school baseball, or would you like to coach high school baseball for many years?
So for next year, I mean, I think we'll be in pretty good shape again. Our current junior, about to be senior class, is the best class I've ever had by like a mile in terms of talent. Like, it's not even close. And so they really kind of drove a lot of what we did this year. And we had 8 seniors, and 4 of them were, pretty much everyday regular players. And so it's going to be tough to replace those guys. But at the same time, like, we really feel like this junior class has enough talent to like overcome that, especially as another year older. And we were down, one of probably our pitcher with the best stuff, didn't throw the whole last 3 quarters of the year because he was hurt. So we'll have him back, Christian Dre, Gonzalez will be back, Cora will be back. We got a rising junior, Dan Ackerman, that we're pretty high on. So all of a sudden you're like, all right, I think we got the arms. We know we got the bats with these juniors. So all of a sudden, it's going to be the same thing. Like, the Highlanders just got to not beat themselves and they'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I think one thing you're going to find also is when you win state championships, you start losing less kids to private schools.
I'm hopeful that's the case.
Everyone loves the winner. These parents, they're front runners for sure. And how about you? Obviously you're an amazing coach, done a great job, and very tough and different types of circumstances. But what would you like to do in your career as a coach?
I mean, I've got a ways to go still. I joked when they hired me at McLean, I was like, you just got to make sure the third base box is wheelchair accessible. Because this is where, I knew that was a community that valued baseball, and we have awesome administration. And I got a ways to go till I can retire from the teaching side of things. So I don't anticipate going anywhere anytime soon. And who knows, in retirement, if I pursue different things, maybe, but right now I couldn't be happier than where I'm at.
Yeah, sounds great, coach. Last question, coach. Who's your pick in major leagues this year?
Cool. God, I'm a Mets fan, and it pains me, but the Phillies are really good. The Phillies are really good. Everybody's gonna say the Dodgers, but the Phillies are tough, man. They're tough.
I bet you being a high school baseball coach is beautiful because in summertime you can watch as much baseball as you want.
It's funny, yeah. My brother-in-law is also a Mets fan, and he'll be sending me things and texts and Instagram messages, and I'm like, dude, I haven't watched a single pitch.
Are you enjoying are you enjoying the rule changes in Major League though? They sped up the game some. Has that been fun?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it works. Like, we went to our athletic department takes all the coaches to a Nats game at the end of the season, and we were there, and all of a sudden I looked up and I was like, holy crap, it's the seventh inning.
Yeah.
And it was, it only been an hour and 40 minutes or something. So yeah, I mean, I think to grow the game and make it more appealing to a broader audience, like they're finding ways to do that. And it's, I mean, the game genuinely feels substantially quicker. So we'll see.
They made some really big moves, and I have to say, it looks like it worked out well. It's whenever you radically change the game like that, it's always risky, and it seems like the moves they made were all pretty smart. I thought when they weren't going to allow the shift in the outfield and the infield, I thought that was a little bit intense because you got to let coaches do their thing. But I think they really had a good idea what they wanted.
Yeah. I don't like the extra. I think extras should still just be regular baseball game at the pro level.
Yeah.
But I get why they did it.
Yeah, it's worked out well. Coach, I really enjoyed this. This was great. Thanks for finally doing this, and congratulations. Next year, I promise you, I'll get out there and see a game. I'm good pals with lots of the McLean Soccer players because my son played against them for many years when he was at Yorktown before we moved out here. So I went to probably 10, 15 of their games this year, but I'll make sure I get to a baseball game next year and check you guys out.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Yeah, coach. Well, thanks again for doing that, and definitely let's keep in touch.
Awesome. Take care. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome, coach. Thank you, buddy.